Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen.
With me today is life coach and LOA teacher Joel Elston.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today.
And Joel, as you know, today's topic is learned helplessness. We can promise right up front we're not going to be talking about learned helplessness in cats or bearded dragons. We have pretty much decided we haven't figured that part out yet.
Yeah, that's our pre-show conversation, so we've eliminated that as a baseline
right.
here. Yeah.
But learned helplessness, I got to tell you, this is an interesting topic to me. Once again, I drew this from your timeline on Facebook because you posted about this very exact topic. The first time I became aware of the concept was when I saw a book written in the 1990s by Dr. Martin Seligman, who had done some extensive investigation of it. And I can tell you I was probably the most surprised person on the planet when a few years later he became one of the leaders of the positive psychology movement.
Yes.
The reason I say that is learned helplessness is about diametrically the opposite of positivity.
I get that. I can see where you would, it is the opposite of being positive. You don't really necessarily know it. It is, and again, we're talking about in today's time and the way things are handled. Learned helplessness is encouraged in many situations. And I really, it's hard sometimes to have that sort of the opposite message of that. And, every week I'll mention this in some form or fashion, but this will fall under the category of, part of that, blame the victim concept. You're blaming the victims here and all that. So it falls under that resilience, growth mindset, those kind of things. It really, there's a group of people, a growing group of people that are really put off by these concepts.
Yeah, very put off. And well, I think probably the part, Joel's having some technology fun, so we'll get him brought back in here as soon as it actually connects. But not only is it something that is growing in number, that the number of people who are I don't want to say devotees, but they are affected. They are strongly influenced by this learned helplessness thing. Not only is that a large number, I'm not so sure that it's a growing number. I think what's happening is our awareness of how many people are affected by it is growing. I think it's more the awareness is growing than the number of people. I mean, you tell me if you think it's different.
I actually think it's a growing number.
You do?
Only because it used to be sort of the opposite way of thinking, the resilience, you overcome, you don't, so I think a lot of it has been exposed to people. It's almost like taught them. I've worked with clients that their therapists previous to me were very encouraging of almost like, there's nothing you can do about this. This is all what you have to deal with. You have to rely on the system. A perfect example is in the medical world is type 2 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes is most often a lifestyle condition, not a type 1 diabetes is a disease that, you're born either not producing any or not enough insulin in your pancreas. And so you're relying on insulin injections and stuff the rest of your life. Where type 2 diabetes is your lifestyle is so generally bad that eating and you gain so much weight that your insulin's producing the pancreas is producing insulin, but it can't keep up because your health is so poor. It constantly, and you develop insulin resistance. And those are people and they may need additional insulin to help deal with that. So that's a learned dependence in a case on something when the solution is to eat healthy, exercise, and you can get rid of type 2 diabetes. That message alone is very, very, that message really angers a lot of people when you say that. It's like they want to defend the fact that, no. My doctor says I can't reverse it. Oh yeah, you can. You're not going to, but you can, is often the case.
So is it fair then to say that learned helplessness is perhaps a first cousin of the nocebo effect? nocebo and placebo. Placebo meaning that if you believe that something's going to cure you or it's going to make you better, that it makes you better. Nocebo having the opposite effect. You believe it's going to make you worse, and it makes you worse. So always saying learned helplessness is a cousin of nocebo.
I would think has a connection for sure. It certainly learned helplessness directly plays into the law of attraction, because a learned helplessness is a belief that you're helpless, and you will attract much more situations that you appear helpless in. Really the basis of my entire coaching life has been about undoing that mindset. It's about resilience, about growth mindset. It's about overcoming. There is nothing that I haven't seen that you can't overcome. And in my life, I haven't been able to see it. Yet there is a group of people that will defend adamantly that they can't get better. We talked a little bit about this last week about certain people with depression and anxiety who really, really get upset when you suggest exercise could help in any way. It just is baffling to them.
Which is, kind of counterproductive when you think about it, because like you said, It's a lifestyle thing. The first thing you need to do is start changing the lifestyle, and that's a pretty obvious way to start changing it. It does raise the question, though, okay, if this learned helplessness, I don't know what we call it, a cycle? Do we call it an epidemic? Whatever we call it, this thing that's happening on larger numbers, according to the way you're looking at it, there's got to be something that is leading people to buy into it, because it does require buy-in, doesn't it? I mean, it's not something that you just get infected with it and it just, it clogs up your nervous system or something like that. You have to have a conscious buy-in.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of it is, one of the culprits of anything that advances is in today's world is social media. Social media has a tendency to reinforce anything. So you have a group of people, who have a similar condition, and they gather together and they all say an example is that often involves learned helplessness is people who are diagnosed with fibromyalgia. It is a nerve disorder. It causes great pain. However, it can't really be diagnosed. It can't be diagnosed with real tests. It's just by, here's my symptoms, and you often get diagnosed with fibromyalgia. There isn't a blood test to say, yep, fibromyalgia. There isn't that. Right. It meets the criteria, so you'll get. So I know people, and I've worked with people, that, I'm not denying that such a condition exists, but I also believe that most people that I have run across with that condition have really bad lifestyle choices as well. And so the idea is, since we can't cure fibromyalgia, if you have fibromyalgia, why don't we look at treating the things that can exacerbate fibromyalgia? Being overweight, eating too much sugar, having a lack of exercise, a lack of sunlight, lack of some, basic stuff. So when people, I have a lady, she came to see me, and I'm very proud of her. She had been to every doctor in town. She got sort of addicted became dependent on opiates. So she had a doctor that was treating her fibromyalgia with opiates. So, it was effective for a while, then it quit being effective, and her pain was still there. So we go over the list. She was getting off the opiates using Suboxone. She weighed 343 pounds at the time. She got no exercise. Her diet included probably 3 2-liter bottles of soda a day.
Wow.
God almighty. And had had more things going on. And so we had a conversation like you're going to have right now. And I said, look, I really want to meet you where you're at. I said, but she goes, I know fibromyalgia isn't curable, but she had known somebody that attempted with that and said they were doing better. And I said, we're going to start by letting the body, this helps if you get them to envision this. Your body is dealing with a lot right now. So why don't we start working on letting your body take a break from sugar? Let's just start with getting rid of the soda. Let's just drink water every day. If you need to reduce it over a period of a month, do that. But just start drinking water every day. And I asked her how many steps a day she was getting, how many just walking. She said probably hardly any. So I start having her track her steps. She was averaging 200 to 300 steps a day. And so we worked on that, and she started increasing her steps. Then we started looking at reducing, potato chips and processed foods and just eating pretty good, not vegan or anything, but eating healthy meat, eggs, good stuff, reducing the carbohydrates as much as possible. And over a period of 6 months, she lost 42 pounds and started reporting she was feeling better. And this continued. So that started the concept. So over a period of a year, she lost a total of 100 pounds, which is a massive amount of weight to lose.
Huge, yeah.
Yeah. And she was up to walking 12,000 steps a day.
Ooh. She
had totally removed soda from her diet. She started doing yoga and adding things to it. And so over a period, she said 70% of my fibromyalgia pain has disappeared. And she continued, and she eventually got down to a really healthy body weight for her of about 180 pounds. And doing fantastic. She's running 3 marathons. Wow. She reports no fibromyalgia symptoms whatsoever. Her anxiety has disappeared. But yet before she walked in the door, there was a belief that fibromyalgia wasn't curable. And she was living to that belief. And then we figured out a way to change her belief system, and she, quote unquote, cured her fibromyalgia because the body now is able to do all the body is supposed to be doing naturally instead of worrying about, we got to produce enough insulin for 200 things of Coke a day. We have to do this. We have to do that. The body's like, yeah, this is easy now. We got it now. And she feels fantastic. So that's an example of a learned helplessness that probably would have killed her eventually. She changed the mindset and she accepted the power. One of my biggest problems that I rant about often in the addiction world, you've heard me say this many times about this 12-step program.
Right.
Where one of the fun, they start off with, you're powerless. Mm-hmm. I know their intent is saying you're powerless over your addiction, and I understand what they're trying to say. But a lot of times in 12-step rooms, they just leave the rest off. You're powerless. Yeah. So you're a victim of this disease of addiction, and you're powerless to help it. And the only way that possibly this would work, you're going to pray to a higher power, and you're going to hope the higher power grants you sobriety. That's basically what they're saying. And and you're powerless to do anything else, so you got to hold on and hope this works. And I will always say 12-step programs do work for a percentage of the people real well, so never change that if something's working. But the idea that I find there's great power in change. Change yourself. You possess the power to change so much in your life, your outlook, your perspective. So I do the opposite. I'm very much a believer in you have complete power over your addiction. Now, that doesn't mean you go drink freely and not be able to, the consequence, you can't drink, of course. That's sort of a no-brainer here. But you have power over your mindset of your health, over your environment, getting everything fixed. You have power over all that. And once you live in the power of that, you really, everything changes. So learned helplessness can take place in 12-step programs where you're helpless in this equation. But hey, we might get lucky here. You'll hear doctors. We talked about doctors giving people fatal diagnosis. There's nothing you can do. Society, we saw this a lot. I saw this a lot with some of my younger clients during the pandemic when they were giving them so much money to stay at home. Mm-hmm. They quit their jobs. They played video games. They bought a lot of pot. And they did that for about a year. And when the money finally ran out, you have a bunch of helpless, unmotivated 20-year-olds. And it was really hard to jumpstart a lot of them. Some of them haven't recovered. Learned helplessness is when you don't allow people the power to fix their problems. Or tell them that they can't be fixed and you're helpless. But if the government, gives you this money, I'm not being political, but if the government gives you this and you stay home and everything's going to be fine, well, the government at some point would stop doing that. And now the growth you would have made working over in promotions you'd have gotten for working over the previous year and a half, all that's gone. So you're starting back at square one.
Wouldn't it be fair to say, though, that the bigger role of teaching helplessness here was actually in something that people would say was necessary, which was the quarantine? Because it was the government that was basically telling us, not just our government, governments all around the world, based on what the health authorities were telling them. They were saying everybody has to quarantine, everybody has to stay home, everybody has to be separate from everybody else, because that's our best chance, not even for stopping the virus, just stopping the pace at which it spreads so that we can handle it within the medical establishment. Well, doesn't that also create a helpless mentality? To my mind, it does, because we are helpless in this situation. And so we all have to cope within the situation of, okay, you are helpless to this disease.
I agree. And historically, previous pandemics before, and I don't want to get a flag warning for the show, but, because it might be controversial. In my mind,
we do something controversial around here. I mean, we do that every week. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't want to get, but I understood at the beginning of this when we didn't know what we're dealing with, maybe a week or two of sort of like what's going on, who's being affected. We quickly learned that older people and people with disabilities were being affected. Younger people were basically just getting the cold, right?
Right.
That was pretty much what we found out. So instead of everybody getting locked down, which I think really contributed to learned helplessness in that case, the obvious thing was let's super protect our elderly and those at risk. Let's do everything we can to get them safe, keep them quarantined. Let's get all that energy getting them done. And the rest of us get out there and get to work and get busy. And then we're going to develop the natural immunity that goes along with that. And ironically, you're hearing a lot of people who are very much in favor of the quarantine say, yeah, we should have done that. We should have done that.
But that makes it for a very interesting test case, because basically we can say the entire globe was a laboratory experiment.
It was.
And I don't mean that in the conspiracy theory sense. I mean in the sense that we can look at this as if we're an experiment where the entire experimented upon population was being subjected to a condition. And the condition wasn't just a disease, it was a mental condition. It was a taught feeling of helplessness. The reason I mention that is there were also a lot of things that came out of the pandemic. One of the big things that came out of the pandemic, a lot of people got sick, millions of people got sick, millions of people died. But something else that came out of the pandemic was people learned so many different ways of being resilient. And I think about, for example, people who, they knew they needed to keep their kids as much as they possibly could feeling positive. So they would, create obstacle courses in the backyard, and they would have graduation ceremonies with buses so that people could wave at each other. And people got very, very creative in the way they were handling the situation. Also became a case where more and more people appreciated things like having online capabilities. They appreciated Zoom, being able to do Zoom phone calls so they could stay in touch with people. There was a whole bunch of stuff that came out of the pandemic that we could label as being very positive. And it all came out of this laboratory situation where everybody was locked down into a mindset of helplessness. So is it fair to say that helplessness can actually lead to growth?
For some people, it's the growth mindset is the opposite of helplessness. Carol Dweck's book, The Growth Mindset, uses, the learned helplessness, basically explaining the opposite of that for people is learned resilience. So there's people that respond with resilience in those situations. There's people that when the pandemic happened, I told every single one of my clients, everybody was worried. What's going to happen? Mm-hmm. And I said, look, I don't know how, but on the other side of this pandemic, I promise you we're going to be better off than we were before. And I don't know what's going to happen to everybody else, but I'm going to be in a better position, and I believe you'll be in a better position. And universally, the clients I had that conversation, they're the ones that went to work. Some of them became wildly successful because it opened up so many different avenues for them to make money that didn't exist. I mean, there's a lot of, like I said, they just started crushing it. I got permission after 4 days to be in person in my office because I was I forget what they called it, necessary person or whatever.
Right.
And, so not that I needed clients, but I had another day of seeing clients to make up for all the additional stuff I got. And I never missed a beat. So I came out better. I turned down, I don't know if this is the wisest move. A lot of my colleagues didn't, but I could have qualified for quite a bit of money, that possibly wouldn't have been able to be paid back. I said, I don't need your money. I went ahead and did it without it. Now turns out I know a lot of people that didn't have to pay it back. So that might have not been my best move in all time, but nonetheless, I have an abundance. It doesn't really matter, but I never doubted that the other side of this was going to be fine for me, be better. My clients have learned and grown. I think it changed in some good ways and some bad ways, but I think there's a side of, corporate America got shook because there's people that don't have to do corporate jobs anymore. They've figured out how to go online and make more money they could ever make. They changed the economy in a lot of ways. So the social experiment, as you said, I think it produced an equal number. In my mind, I like to think maybe even a higher number of learned resilience, of overcoming, of learned. So sometimes learned helplessness or an attempt, what most people would fall for learned helplessness. There's people that have the opposite. Let's just get this going. Right. When I was in the very ends of my addiction and everything was falling apart and I lost everything, I was helpless. I thought there was nothing moving forward. I could not see a path forward. I had a day where all that I could come up with, either I had to kill myself or figure out a way to just I couldn't gamble anymore. How am I going to make this work? And that point, I went from learned helplessness and I eventually gained learned resilience. And I'm a far better person. I have far more success than I ever would have had if all that didn't happen. And so I look at all that again, not that I want to repeat it. That was an event that literally set a cascading event going forward. So to me, anybody with learned helplessness, here's the positive side of it. I think you're a step away from learned resilience when you allow that to happen. I loved when people make that's it. I have a young man right now that I was working with that he's been in foster care. He was adopted, had a pretty good life, but he's had this really sort of negative, the learned helplessness. Well, I can't ever really do anything. Everybody's always picked on me. I've just really a very negative dialogue. Well, recently, I've been really on his ass. I mean, in a good way, pushing him and, you need a different perspective. You look at what's right. Well, he started trying a little harder at school. He got his grades up. And then he took a test, got accepted to this elite program that he never thought he'd get. And now he's on fire in the other direction. And it started with once he got going, and you can use those things as catalysts. So that's one of the things I try to do is take those that are helpless and they've learned helplessness and then to rewire that into that powerful. There's nothing more powerful than learned resilience. There's nothing weaker than learned helplessness. And there's nothing more powerful than learned resilience because like so many things, they're really the same thing, but it's perspective of how they work.
Yeah, that key word there, perspective, I think really sums it. I'm thinking about the commentary that comes from Abraham Hicks's teachings, particularly around law of attraction, but they taught that the first step of attracting something is to identify what it is that you don't want.
Yes.
So that you can, in the next step, identify what you do want. The idea being we need as human beings living in this duality, contrast universe that we live in, we need to have the dark in order to appreciate where the light is. We need to have the access to the opposite of what we want, so we know that no, I don't want that. I want this instead. And it strikes me that people who get stuck in the learned helpless position are people who never make it from step A to step B. They're just stuck on, I don't want this. I don't like that. I don't want this. I don't like that. They never actually get to, this is what I want instead.
Right. And that's the answer for people that get stuck there. And there are, as I was saying, there are a lot of people that will support. Yes, you're right. You you are underappreciated. You have no support. There is no cure for this. There isn't any way out. And that becomes reality. It becomes, again, law of attraction based. So you'll see this, and that's where the value of having a coach or a therapist or a friend who can help redefine that, help point that in the right direction, because every single thing, I've been through some bad stuff. I mean, there's no sugarcoating what I've been through. It's been bad.
Right.
However,
Oh, yeah.
There's nobody more helpless than me when I, got out of jail, convicted felon, owed $250,000, and all the whole story I've said a million times. I couldn't have come up with a plausible plan short of winning the lottery that would have cleaned all that out.
Right.
And magically I got to a place like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did this. It's such a, and now I have no doubt about things. I have no doubt about how I can make things. And so it was a process. It's like trusting the entire process. When you go to the gym, if I take somebody to the gym the first time and I hand them the bar to bench press, they most likely won't be able to do the bar very well at all. It'd be very unbalanced, and they might be able to do it once or twice. Bar weighs 45 pounds, in case you didn't know that.
Okay.
But you can add, I might add 10 pounds, you end up 95. But if you let me work with you in 6 months, and in 3 months, I can have you bench pressing 135 pounds. And in 6 months, I can have you bench pressing 225 pounds. And I can have you, if you stick with the entire year, I can have you bench pressing 315 pounds. Because that momentum goes. You start with, you are helpless, and the strengthening process of getting out of learned helplessness is the process of growth. I think there is value in that moment of learned helplessness. The problem is being stuck in the helplessness that you're pointing out. That's the big problem. We sort of got to that. The idea that helpless moment can lead to a point of action which takes everything in the right direction, or it could lead to the concession to the helplessness, and that's when life gets really bad.
I have this deep-seated feeling / belief that a large portion of the problem where learned helplessness is concerned, specifically this problem that we are identifying where someone gets stuck in that learned helpless position, I have a very strong feeling that a large chunk of that comes from, I want to be careful how I say this because this is a term that can have multiple meanings, our love affair with authority. I almost said authoritarian, but that has a different political meaning. I'm trying to stay away from that. We have love affair with authority. You mentioned doctors, for instance. People revere doctors. Doctors, for most people, have the final say on your health. That's the way they think about it. And the problem, of course, with an authority situation is if the authority gives good advice or proper advice or right or however you want to describe it, it can help you move forward. If the authority gives counterproductive advice, they can actually hold you back because you're believing in an authority that's leading you in the wrong direction. But your trust for that authority overrides anything that might be going on inside your head that says, oh, I'm not so sure this is the right way to go. No, I'm going to trust that authority. So I'm going to propose the idea that a part of this stuck in learned helplessness thing that goes on has to do with the love affair we're having with authority.
Yes, and that's a really good observation. I think and sometimes the authority can be political leaders. It could be religious leaders. It could be news people. I mean, it could be influencers. There's a lot of people out there saying stuff. Doctors, like you said, are really, one of my favorite people of all time and my mentor, Dr. Sherman Master, who passed away several years ago. The reason I fell in love with this guy as a mentor is he's told me something that I never heard a doctor ever. I mentioned this on the show before. I've never heard a doctor my entire life say. I asked him a question, and he goes, I don't know.
Yeah, that's rare.
And I go, what? And he goes, I don't know. He said, you're more of an expert on that than I am, but I don't know the answer to that. And this is a brilliant man. I'm talking about, he's I mean, if you research Dr. Sherman Master, he's a pioneer in addiction medicine, world renowned, seriously. And he said he didn't know. That was, oh my gosh, he had me at that point. And he didn't know what he was doing because I was expecting just some rambling doctor answer just to make him not, and, but yes, you'll get that a lot. You'll get the doctors that sometimes will, not intentionally sometimes, but they just don't always go in the right direction. And the idea that you get reinforced from that, you'll believe it. And I have a friend at the gym. He's a former NFL player, and he's had some pretty serious surgeries over the year. And over the years, we were, I know him. We never really worked out together. I do a lot of heavy squats and deadlifts and stuff. And so one day him and I were talking. He said, the doctor says I can't do any squats or deadlifts. That's okay. And, then a week or two later, he's over there watching me squat and deadlift. He goes, how do you do so much weight at your age? And I go, I've just done it my entire life. If done properly, you can't really hurt yourself. And, so I said, why don't we start trying? He goes, well, my doctor says I can't. I go, well, is your doctor here right now? So let's just try.
You rebel, you.
Yeah. So I got him to try the bar and squat, and he didn't squat very deeply, but he was able to go probably a quarter squat, but just with the bar. Again, remind me the bar weighs 45 pounds. And he was able to do it like 3 or 4 times, and that's all he could do. I said, okay. So
by the way, this is significant because we're talking about a former NFL player. NFL players routinely exercise with large amount of weight. So the NFL player, I mean, clearly it wasn't the weight that was the issue. There was something going on inside him if you'd given him no weight at all, he probably would have had a hard time getting down that far.
Yeah. He had a hard time walking. I mean, we were really in it. So over the period, I might have him on the show one day, over a period of time, he went from, instead of that quarter squat, doing almost a full half squat, his weight went up from the bar itself, again, 45 pounds then he went to 135 for multiple reps. Then he went to, the other day, he was doing 225 for 3 reps, and his walking has improved greatly. His pain in his back has disappeared. We do modified deadlifts with a thing called a trap bar. It doesn't really matter why, but he's able to do deadlifts. And while he still has some issues, the pain he was under is gone. He's much stronger. And he had a belief system that his doctor was infallible and he wasn't able to squat anymore. He wouldn't be able to do that anymore and would really need to continually be on this various medications and muscle relaxers to go. He's not on any of that anymore. And it's just, I don't think his doctor was being mean or trying to harm him in any way, but he wasn't allowing for the concept that this is an elite athlete. He's an NFL player. To be an NFL player at any point in the NFL, you have to be such an elite athlete, way out of my league. And so they're underestimating what the guy's body could do. And, he went from learned helplessness to learned resilience. And, he fired his doctor a couple of weeks ago. Said, look, I'm tired of you telling me what I can't do. It's just, we've disproven that we can't do it. It's just, so I don't know why I'm coming to you for you to tell me to quit lifting weights when the 2 years I saw you before that, I was in ungodly pain and couldn't, we're dismissing you. And it's a beautiful story. But he was told through an authority that he would not be able to do these things and would deal with this pain for the rest of his life.
I think it's important to remember and recognize too that it really had nothing to do with the weights. I mean, that was certainly part of the story because your story was he was trying to understand how you could possibly do that much squat with weight, but it actually had nothing to do with weight. It had to do with what was going on in his mind. And to give an example of that, I'll talk about my own situation. As many listeners know, over the last 6 months, I've been going to physical therapy for an issue with my Achilles tendon, and actually throughout my right leg, but particularly isolated around the tendon. And I've been learning a lot about how my body operates from a really wonderful physical therapist. She's been teaching me so much stuff. The condition that I've been dealing with, she labels as neuropathy. And neuropathy is essentially my nervous system not reacting the way it normally would because it's overreacting to what's going on in the musculoskeletal system. And the first time that I really got personal evidence to show me that that was really going on was when very early on she gave me a number of exercises to do at home each day. And one of those exercises was literally, this is going to sound so strange. It was literally sitting down and sticking my foot out and turning it to the side and just doing that over and over again. She called it nerve gliding. Mm-hmm. And if I would do that when my Achilles tendon in particular was hurting, was really quite sore, if I would do that for about a minute and a half, the pain would reduce by about 80% to 90%.
Wow.
And I thought, that's fucked up. I mean,
yeah,
what
yeah.
the hell? Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm during this chronic pain. I sit down, I stick my leg out at this very weird angle that she taught me how to do, and the pain would almost completely go away. And since then, as I progressed through the whole process of, basically, I've had to retrain my muscular system. There's a whole thing there that I can talk about one day. But the point is, I've gotten more exercises to do as I've progressed. One of the exercises that she's had me doing for the last 3 months or so, she calls rock backs. Basically, I get down on all fours, like, doggy kind of position. And then I just kind of rock my hips backward, sort of like I'm in a sideways squat, if you will. And when I do that about 4 or 5 times, any pain that I've got goes away. And wow. I think to myself, what the hell? What the hell? I mean, the pain is directly associated with me using my leg, using my ankle, using my Achilles tendon, and then I get down in a rock position and it takes the pain away. It showed to me really, really clearly the pain had nothing to do with the physiology of the leg. It had everything to do with what's going on in my mind.
Yeah, you're all pain takes place in the brain, all of it.
Right. Yeah.
No matter what the origin, it feels like it's, yes, your toe hurts. That's the origin, but the pain is registered in the brain. And when you get a neuropathy or the nervous system can get firing wrong and the pain can go everywhere. It can be anywhere. It can do anything. And so once you calm that system, pain reduces greatly. Calming that system and those movements will calm that system.
Well, is there any greater evidence then that the mind plays a direct role in things like pain, in things like what's going to happen to me? I mean, talk about self-empowerment. I went from feeling helpless to feeling like, oh, God, I can actually beat this thing.
Yeah. Well, I've used examples many times. I'll just use a generic example of an alcoholic that is going through withdrawals. He's trying to stop drinking and he's not using any medical assistance. He's at home and he's just, he's shaking and sweating and he feels terrible, feels like he's going to die. And he says, never mind. I'm just going to get some alcohol. The moment he makes the decision to get in his car, crank the car and go, all that goes away.
Yeah. Of course, he probably doesn't recognize that. He probably doesn't notice that.
No. I had that play out. I've shared this on the show before. I used to run groups at this facility that dealt with opiate addicts, and they would be on Suboxone. That is a drug that helps alleviate the withdrawal symptoms. And on Saturday morning, I was doing a group probably 7 years ago, and this lady came in, and she was looking terrible. And she sat down by me on the floor holding a pillow, and she goes, Joel, I ran out of Suboxone last night. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to, I said, well, do you want to just sit here? What do you want to, I got to run my group. What do you want to do? She said, can you call the doctor? And I can't go and give anybody Suboxone, so I don't have that authority.
Sure.
I said, yeah, I'll call the doctor and see what he said. So I called Dr. Thompson. He was our director, and explained the situation. He said, yeah, I'll tell you what, I need to come down there anyway. I'll be down there when your group's over, and I'll give her some Suboxone to get her through the weekend.
Okay.
And so as I continued the group, I told her that when I hung up the phone, I was to continue the group. I looked over after I told her that, and she was sitting there calmly, hands crossed, and just smiling and participating with the group. Her withdrawal symptoms were relieved knowing that help was on the way.
Right.
She wasn't faking. She was really, it was all real,
Oh, sure.
but the brain's able to say, okay, that's all I needed to know. That's the best they can hope for. So I just, and I've watched that happen many, many times. That case was one of the most, obvious I'd ever seen. I wish I had a film running because it was so clear. And I pointed it out to her, afterwards, and, she goes, yeah, the moment you told me that, it was like they went away. She said, I thought about that. It's like, she goes, how much of this is in my brain? I go, well, basically all of it. But, she got her Suboxone and everything was fine. But that idea, we often will hear that relief, that something, you'll have examples of that, where the pain or the anxiety goes away, just by the concept of, okay, I know I don't have help now, but help's on the way, or there's a solution here, and that's okay.
There are a couple of factors going on here, and I'm really focused on both of them at the moment. One is what we commonly call the placebo effect. We've talked about that here. I made reference to it earlier. The belief that X is going to help you feel better, and therefore it helps you feel better. Something that the double-blind placebo-controlled studies do their damn best to try to eliminate because they don't want to be part of their test results. Okay, so that's part of it. But like I was also describing with the neuropathy, how just simply doing an exercise produced a result that I didn't expect at all. In other words, I was not expecting a placebo. Right. There was no preset expectation of placebo, and yet I still had that kind of result. It makes me think that there are a couple of different functions going on in the brain here. One we know of, we call the placebo effect, the belief that something is going to help you. But there's a second one here, and I don't know how to label it. I don't know how to describe it, but clearly what I experienced with the relief of my neuropathy had nothing directly to do with placebo. It had to do with something else related to my mind.
Well, there's more than a few. There's one I call the sort of the distraction effect. The idea that, anxiety, when somebody is having a panic attack, there's several breathing exercises. So I have a young man I worked with that, he had really bad panic attacks. He was 13, and I didn't want him on any, major drugs at that age. So, him and I created this bizarre, really deep breathing, square breathing, where you breathe fast and you breathe slow. Then I'd have him take, this finger to this finger. We created this whole thing. And it totally stopped his panic attacks in the process. And I do think the breathing has an effect of regulating. I think there's a physiological effect of that. But he said what helps him the most is the distraction of the thing with the fingers, the distraction. Because you have to concentrate. It's like forefinger to forefinger there. And you go through each finger, touching each finger. And it's like you have to make sure it happens. And he said, so when my brain gets distracted in that exercise. So one of the things we talked about, maybe it was last week or the week before, but that concept of taking any action, going and washing the dishes, sometimes that distraction from that gets you out of where you're at. So there's that distraction effect. In your case, there's, believe it or not, the origins of hypnotherapy, were really sort of figured out from religion. So back in the old days when people would go around preaching, they put the preacher up on a pedestal. They gave him a book of divine knowledge. They dressed him in really fancy robes and big hats. And he spoke from a position of authority like we talked about earlier. And so what he was saying brought that there, and he would say things over and over and over. So there is that sort of that hypnotizing effect of, wow, they really believe this. So there could be that instead of the distraction effect, there could be the hypnotic effect. There could be, there's really unlimited effects, I believe, if you could identify them each one. You taking a movement like that, the whole electrical system within the body, which is where pain travels. Maybe that movement of the thing just disrupts that enough to make it help with the whole body.
Yeah, I think that's probably on the right track, because what I've noticed with
Yeah.
these rock back exercises is that when I start doing them, I feel it in a number of different ways in my body. Literally, physically feel it. I feel it in my stomach because I'm supposed to kind of pull my belly button in as I'm doing it.
Right.
My back is supposed to stay relatively straight, so I feel my lower back in particular stretching out, which tells me it was compressed. It was tight, so to speak. I can feel my hips stretching in a sense too. I mean, I can feel everything from like the middle back all the way down to the thighs stretching out. And as that
Yes.
stretches out, that's when the pain goes away.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it tells me that there's a physical change I'm going through here, but that physical change is basically realigning my body.
Yeah. And a lot of Eastern medicine believes in, acupuncture is sort of the similar concept of, clearing the energy blocks, being able to, place that, acupuncture needle at the right place and clearing the energy blocks that are there. Uh, Acupuncture is super effective for people that believe that acupuncture is super effective. As we've talked about, it really
Yeah.
works great for people that believe it. Doesn't work so great for those that don't. Uh, but there's a lot of processes that the body is responding to. We'll never really, it'll be a long time before we understand a lot of this, but there are all kinds of techniques that take place, but learned helplessness being the overall topic that is, it isn't the problem, as we said, it's being stuck in that problem. That's where learned helplessness is debilitating. I've seen it cost people, any conceivable. I know people that are so helpless that I heard I adopted Justin 7 years ago, and one of the more annoying things about adopting a child, I got to go get his social security card from the social security office, and you can't do that one by phone or mail, so I have to
Right.
go to the office.
Right.
And so I went prepared for my morning. I had my noise canceling earphones on, and I'm just ready to just sit there and wait,
I think I remember this
and
story. Yeah.
yeah. And so as I was there and I was sort of getting settled, I found me a little chair, and there's groups of tables, and people were talking about, well, if I also have my knee is disabled, I will get like $30 more a month, or I'll get this higher percentage of disability,
Right.
and it will go from $900 to $930, and
Yeah.
they were having these conversations about how they could game the system and get, all the way up to like $1,000 in a month or something like that. And, from my perspective, not trying to be judgmental, but I was sitting there going, why would you not just get, wow, they were like worried about, they wanted to display their disability and get more money for it. Where I'm like, why would you even want to? That one guy said, I can't get a job because I'll lose my disability. I go, well, you can make so much more money in a job than this. Why would you not want to give this up? But it was really telltale sign to sit there. It was a room full of people who have become, they were exhibiting learned helplessness. The whole
Well,
room.
I think you just hit a key point there with a phrase that you used. They didn't want to.
No, didn't want to.
That's
Yeah.
pretty important. If you don't want to do something, your whole orientation is going to be about not doing it, about doing something else instead, about avoiding doing that one thing. So apparently, from what we're talking about here, the decision that we make, the choice that we make about something, is really powerful. I mean, so
Well, it
powerful
is.
that it can hold us in that state of learned helplessness. Talk about learning it. We learn it really well, apparently.
We do. And you have it in a sort of another scenario. If you know somebody that has an alcohol addiction, for example, it's clear to you they have an alcohol addiction,
Mhm.
and nobody's ever mentioned that to them. They may know it on some level, but you walk to them and say, hey, buddy, I noticed you drink quite a bit. Why don't we help? I want to help you get off alcohol. They're like, why are you crazy? I'm offended you. What, I don't have an alcohol problem. They will defend that. Usually it isn't the first time that somebody suggests you have a problem, you need help, that people stop. There has to be a convincing chain of events to say, I got a real problem and I'm desperate to stop. in the beginning, they don't want to stop. So a lot of times people,
in the beginning, it's probably perceived to be a solution rather than a problem.
yeah, it is. And it may have been. That's the other thing. Sort of that it's maybe was a solution that turned into a problem. But that is the same thing that we're looking at. So all of this is related, that what you want, what you really want, and what you're afraid of losing, what you're fearful of would happen if things change, become all of that same category of learned helplessness. And it's reinforced. If I lose my disability check, what will I do? Well, maybe get a job. I mean, I'm not trying to be that guy. I don't mean that. I'm not trying to be the person but could you not consider getting a job and try to make it? Wouldn't that be more fulfilling? But it's like, oh no, I don't want to lose my disability. It's like, okay, well, I guess that's what you're after. You don't want to lose it.
So the person who doesn't want to lose the disability in that situation, in some ways we would discern that as being, well, or maybe we actually judge it as being, well, he's dependent, he's created a dependency on that. And so that's where his learned helplessness comes from. But from his perspective, does he see it as being dependent upon it?
No. He has conceded. He's conceded that for the rest of my life, I'm going to be dependent on the 3% I'm going to get increase a year. And as I get older, it might get a little higher. And I will learn to live on $980 a month or whatever that number is. And it's sad, but it's just the way the system is set up, and it breeds learned helplessness.
It's more than that, though. It's more than the way that the system is set up, because we just acknowledged it was a choice that he made that he felt was a positive choice. Regardless of what you and I think about it, he thought of it as a positive choice.
It is. And what I meant by this way the system is set up, I left the whole part out, sorry, is if you make too much money, you lose your disability. Mm-hmm. What we need is a system that encourages people to eventually wean themselves off of it, change the system where you can say, look, you can make additional money that doesn't affect it up to this amount, and then we will help wean you off of it over time, and you'll have a more giving movement forward. The system is created you must stay on it or you will or lose it if you try to do something else. So that's the system that reinforces that.
It's a really fascinating thing, because so often as we talk about all these different topics, including this particular one, we're talking in terms of what kind of outside influence can I bring in, or what kind of outside activity can I do, or what kind of thing can I do in my interaction in the real world in order to get from A to B. And yet there are also times when we talk about, well, it's really just an inside job. It's the internal conversation that makes actually the most difference. And it's an interesting dichotomy. On the one hand, we do recognize the value of those actions, taking action, we had a conversation about that just last week. Just making one little change in your behavior pattern can produce different results. And yet by the same token, we also know that the external conversations aren't nearly as important or as powerful as the internal conversations. I'm just pointing out, this is a really interesting paradigm going on here. There's the inside, there's the outside, and they almost seem sometimes to be working together, and other times they seem to be working against each other.
And at the end of the day, the solution is always going to be internal. It's always going to be perspective based and internal. That's always going to be the solution, where there needs to be a decision to flip the switch from learned helplessness to that learned resilience model. Now the catalyst can be outside. The catalyst can come from any direction. It could be, I'm sick and tired of this. It could be going to jail. There could be a million things that change it, but it could be internally just making a decision. But the act of making that decision I'm going to switch from the victim mode to the helpless, the learned helplessness that goes on here to over on this other side. My son TJ, when I first adopted him, or he first came into my home as a foster care kid, he was 10 years old, and he had not been to school, and very often he really did not know how to read at all. So one of the things that he had a wonderful teacher, that are still my dear friend, who started working with him to start to read. So we were around his birthday or Christmas or something, and he wanted, a PlayStation. And I said, okay. So I got him a PlayStation. And within the PlayStation, and any video game he got usually required him reading of what to do. Today it's a little more advanced, but so
I was wondering if that's where you're going. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So he would bring me the pamphlet of things that he needed to do. And he goes, here, will you read that? I go, nope. He goes, well, that's not fair. I said, well, then within a week or two, TJ's reading. He's really motivated to read. He wanted to play that video game. He had stuff he had to do. He got really good at it. And so you could light that fuse sometimes. I know things for me, I've taken steps to do things because I wanted to get something that I couldn't have otherwise had. So, the idea that any of this is there's a decision, there's a leap. It can come from any different direction, but at the end of the day, a decision to flip the switch from learned helplessness to a learned resilience model is where the change takes place. And it's the most life-changing thing a human being can experience. It changes it not only for that moment, but for me, it changed the whole trajectory of my life. It just, the statement that I've mentioned a few weeks ago, I think, on the show, and I'll tell people this often, the old, quote, you've been assigned this mountain to prove that it can be moved. It can be moved.
All right. Yeah.
I love that. And I also added to that, the first mountain was really hard to move. The second mountain just gets the hell out of my way. It doesn't, they don't tell you there's only one mountain to move. The rest there's no more mountains after that because you don't see them. They're not there. The first mountain took forever, but all the rest are like, no, we don't want any of that. So they stay out of the way.
One final thought for you to address before we wrap up, because as usual, we've ripped through an hour. That's what we're good at.
Yes,
we do that all the time. But as you were just describing, this strong tendency that we have to be able to deal with a situation of any kind, no matter how painful, no matter how no matter how problematic, if we're motivated enough in that direction, if we're motivated in the direction of change, and the motivation really does have to come within. It's possible to impose external motivation, but it's usually not nearly as effective as motivation that comes from within. So
yes.
if we hypothesize somebody who is really motivated to make a change, somebody who's really motivated to get from place A to place B, aren't we also talking about somebody who has already flipped that switch? In other words, isn't the flipping of the switch what comes first, and then we feel the motivation?
I believe so. I think that would be the order. I'd have to think about it more deeply, but I think yes. That internal motivation that, what is it that's going to, get this going? When I made a decision, I'm not going to whine about this anymore. I'm either going to literally, again, I don't revise this, choice, maybe these, narrowing to these two choices, but either kill myself or turn my life around. I flipped the switch before I had any remote idea of what I needed to do. I knew I had to change that mindset, and then everything started happening. And again, when I say that, it sounds like, it didn't happen instantly.
No, it can. It's not impossible. It's just not.
No, for me, mine wasn't instantly. It was, it felt, like it was slow motion. In retrospect, it wasn't.
Right.
But it really, all of this is influenced by that internal energy, that internal energy and how it's directed. That helpless energy. And anybody that's experienced this, if it comes, I want to make sure I'm really clear. I am not making fun of anyone. Anybody that is stuck in a learned helpless model. I'm sorry that there isn't a worse place to live. I lived there. I understand. Mm. I hope what you hear from me is there is a flip switch. There's a switch you could flip and you can get there. That's my only thing. It's not, I'm not picking on people who are in a state of learned helplessness. I understand how you can get there. I can understand how you can see no path forward. Just maybe a little different perspective. What if there is that switch this guy's talking about? And what if I flip that? What's going to happen? It ain't going to get any worse. Let's see what happens.
So to summarize our conversation, which I don't dare to do because the conversation was going through some really cool rabbit holes for about an hour. But if I had to pick one quick way to summarize it, I would pick this. Flip the switch in your mind, even though nothing else has changed.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I love that. You start there. There's nothing that we've ever talked about on the show in all these years of doing this together that isn't starting with an internal something. Everything's internal. A decision too. A decision of what you don't like, a decision of whatever it is. Everything takes place internally and goes from there. There is no fix that's not internal. Now, there's often outside things that are needed to process this, but that initial thing is always internal.
Good way to summarize and finish up our conversation for the day. As usual, Joel, this was brilliant. I loved this conversation. I mean, I got stuff out of this. I feel like I filled in some gaps and closed some circuits that hadn't been closed and so forth. So yeah, really, really good stuff, my friend. Thank you very much.
Well, and I don't feel we got that crazy tonight. So I apologize to those who were expecting a little more crazy from me. I'll try harder next week.
Just tune in next week. It'll happen. It always happens. You don't even have to worry about it. It's coming. It's just going to be there. So thank you very much. Thank you, podcast listeners everywhere. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.